The morning was chilly and fog-laden, much like my life since Margaret had passed away. At 79, each day begins with new aches in various parts of my body and ends with reflections on those who are no longer sitting beside me at the dinner table. I, Jeremiah Cole, have grown accustomed to the solitude of my two-story home in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, which Margaret and I purchased back in the 1970s. It's spacious, overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, with a yard that I still try to maintain despite my arthritis flaring up. That morning, I was preparing my usual oatmeal for breakfast in the kitchen. The television was tuned to the local news, providing the only voice to break the silence of the house. I was just about to sit down at the table when I heard the sound of a car pulling up in the driveway. I looked out the window and saw my son Nathan's Navy SUV. What on earth, I muttered to myself. Nathan usually gave me advance notice instead of showing up unannounced at 8 in the morning. I stepped out onto the porch, wrapped in my old robe. 4 people emerged from the car: my son Nathan, his wife Cassandra, and my grandsons Liam and Sophie. Cassandra immediately took charge of unloading the suitcases, not even bothering to say hello to me. Dad. Nathan smiled tensely as he climbed the stairs. We thought we'd come for a visit with 7 suitcases. I nodded toward the trunk from which Liam was pulling another bag. We plan to stay for a while, Nathan answered, avoiding my gaze. We're renovating our place. Remember I told you about it on the phone? I didn't remember anything of the sort. The last time we'd spoken was 3 weeks ago, and Nathan had only inquired about my health and daily routine. How long do you plan to stay? I asked directly. A month. Maybe 2. Nathan shrugged. Don't worry. We won't be in your way. He patted me on the shoulder and headed into the house. Cassandra followed him, barely nodding at me, holding her elegant purse and cell phone. Hey, Grandpa, Liam mumbled, walking past with 2 suitcases. Hello, Grandpa. Sophie, my granddaughter, at least attempted a smile, but she was quickly absorbed by her phone. I was left standing on the porch, gazing out over the ocean and realizing that my tranquil life had just come to an abrupt end. It took me about 10 minutes to collect my thoughts and re-enter the house, which was now filled with the voices and scents of others. In the kitchen, Cassandra was emptying the contents of my refrigerator. Jeremiah, this cheese has expired by 2 days, she exclaimed, showing me a package of cheddar. And what is this terrible sausage? It's loaded with preservatives. You could get sick instantly. I watched in silence as she threw away the groceries I had purchased just 3 days ago. I wanted to tell her that I had lived to 79 years old, eating what I enjoyed. But I restrained myself. Nathan, meanwhile, was wandering through the house, examining the rooms and talking on his phone. Dad, he said, returning to the kitchen, Cassandra and I will take the master bedroom. Okay, you'll be more comfortable on the first floor, so you don't have to climb the stairs. I felt something tighten inside me. The master bedroom was where I had slept with Margaret for 50 years. Her pictures were still there, her books scattered around. I'm quite comfortable in my bedroom, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I use the stairs every day. It's good for my joints. But Dad, Cassandra interjected, you're 79. It's risky to climb stairs at your age. What if you fall at night when you go to the bathroom? I have an upstairs bathroom, I objected, and I've never fallen down the stairs in my life. There's a first time for everything. Cassandra said, Nathan, tell your father we're concerned for his safety. Nathan looked at me with that mix of pity and annoyance I'd noticed in his eyes lately. Dad, please, it's only for a short time. Besides, the bedroom on the first floor is quite cozy. Cozy wasn't the term I'd use for the former guest room. It had a narrow bed, an old dresser, and little else. but I realized arguing was pointless. I nodded and went upstairs to gather my belongings. Moving into the small room took me the entire day. Not because I had a lot of stuff, but because every item in the master bedroom was tied to a memory. The picture of Margaret and me on the beach in Nantucket, our wedding rings in a box on the dresser, her favorite vase that I never stored after she died. By the time I finished that evening, the house no longer resembled the one I'd lived in for the past 50 years. Cassandra had hung some contemporary paintings, arranged her decorative items on the mantelpiece, and relocated my photographs. The living room now contained Nathan's large suitcase, which he hadn't even bothered to unpack. The grandchildren had taken over the second bedroom upstairs, where my office used to be, and from there came loud music and the sounds of video games at dinner, which Cassandra had prepared from organic produce she'd brought. I felt like a visitor at my own table. Nathan and Cassandra were discussing their plans without attempting to include me in the conversation. "We have to repaint the kitchen," Cassandra said. "That awful blue color looks so outdated." "But it's Margaret's favorite color," I objected. "She chose that paint herself." "Jeremiah, that was 40 years ago." Cassandra rolled her eyes. "Nobody paints kitchens blue now. I'm thinking light gray with accents of teal." "This is my house," I reminded her, "and I don't plan on repainting it." "Dad," Nathan interjected, "we just want to freshen things up a little. It'll be good for the value of the house, too." "Are you planning to sell my house?" I felt anger rising inside. "Of course not," Nathan answered quickly. "But it's always wise to keep the property in good condition." I noticed how he and Cassandra exchanged glances. Something in that look made me uneasy. After dinner, the grandchildren quickly disappeared upstairs without washing the dishes. I started loading the plates into the dishwasher, but Cassandra stopped me. "Jeremiah, you're doing it wrong. The plates have to be rinsed first or the machine will get clogged." "I've been using this dishwasher for 20 years, I replied. "I know how it works." "Nathan," Cassandra turned to my son, who was in the living room staring at his laptop. "Tell your father that he can ruin the machine." Nathan didn't even look up. "Dad, please do as Cassandra says. She's better at appliances." I walked out of the kitchen silently and into my new room. I sat on the edge of the bed and, for the first time that day, felt how exhausted I was. Not physically, but emotionally. I pulled out the picture of Margaret I always carried. "What would you do if you were me?" "Darling," I whispered, looking at her smiling face. The following days turned into a real ordeal. Cassandra established a new routine in the house without asking my opinion. Breakfast was now at 9, not 8, as I was used to. My morning coffee was replaced by herbal tea because caffeine is bad for your heart at your age. Jeremiah. My favorite shows on TV were declared too loud and outdated. In their place, the living room now featured endless reality shows that Cassandra watched, or sports channels that Nathan switched to. One day, I returned from a morning walk and found that my collection of old records, which I had collected all my life, had disappeared from the living room. "Where are my records?" I asked Cassandra, who was arranging decorative candles on the shelf where my record player used to stand. "Oh, that old junk." She didn't even turn to me. "I put it away in the garage. They were collecting so much dust. And Sophie's allergic." "It's not junk," I said indignantly. "Some of these records are rare editions. They're worth money." "Jeremiah, nobody listens to records these days." She finally looked at me with that condescending smile I despised. "If you want music, Liam can show you how to use a streaming service." I left the house and headed for the garage. My records were piled in an old cardboard box. Some of the sleeves were crumpled. I carefully pulled them out, checking for damage. The first edition of Miles Davis's Kind of Blue that I'd bought back in the 1960s. The Ella Fitzgerald albums that Margaret had loved so much they were all piled carelessly like trash. I took the box to my room and hid it under my bed. At least there Cassandra wouldn't get to them. The grandchildren barely spoke to me. Liam was constantly busy with his own things, either attending job interviews or going out with friends. Sophie spent most of her time in her room, occasionally coming down to grab something from the refrigerator. When I tried to talk to her about college or her plans, she would answer in monosyllables and quickly find an excuse to leave. One day, I offered my help when she was working on a project for school. "I can assist you with your research," I said. After all, I worked as a postal clerk for 45 years and know a thing or two about organizing information. Sophie looked at me with that peculiar expression young people have when they think an old person is hopelessly outdated. "Thanks, Grandpa, but I'll search it online," she replied, and went back to her laptop. A week after they arrived, I discovered that Cassandra had thrown out my old photo albums that I kept in the hall closet. "Why would you do that?" I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw the albums in the trash can in the backyard. "Jeremiah, they were taking up too much space, and we needed somewhere to store our stuff," she replied without apologizing. "Besides, all those old photos can be scanned and stored digitally. It's much more convenient that way." "These albums are my life," I said, pulling them out of the trash. "These are pictures of my parents, of my youth, of Nathan's early years." "Dad," Nathan intervened, who as usual appeared when the conflict had already started. "We're just trying to clean up. There's too much stuff." I looked at him. "This is my house, and these things are my life. I didn't ask you to clean it up." "But you live alone," Nathan said with the tone he'd use when talking to me as if I were frail. "It's hard for you to manage a house this big. We're just helping out." I took the albums to my room and added them to the growing collection of things I had to rescue from Cassandra. My little room was slowly becoming a repository for my life, which was being methodically purged from the rest of the house. That night, sitting on my narrow bed and flipping through the salvaged albums, I thought seriously about my future for the first time. It was obvious that Nathan and Cassandra weren't planning to leave in a month as they claimed. They were settling in, changing the house to suit themselves, gradually displacing me and my belongings. I felt like a ghost in my own home, whose footprints were being methodically erased. I looked at the picture of Margaret and me standing in front of this house the day we bought it. We were so happy then, full of plans and hopes. We imagined growing old here, sitting on the porch and watching the sunset over the ocean. Margaret didn't live to see it. Cancer took her 7 years ago, and now I was in danger of losing the house we loved so much, too. I couldn't let that happen. I had to find a way to regain control of my life before it was too late. Everything changed one rainy Sunday, 3 weeks after my house had become someone else's territory. I was sitting in my room, as I had been doing for the past few days, rereading old letters from Margaret and listening to jazz from my phone through headphones. Liam had shown me how to use a streaming app. After all, it was the only useful thing that had happened in these days. It was drizzling outside the window, drops trickling down the glass, and I remembered all those rainy days we'd spent with Margaret by the fireplace, discussing books we'd read and plans for the future. A quiet knock on the door brought me out of my reverie. I took off my headphones and invited them in, expecting to see Nathan or Cassandra with another complaint. But Sophie's head appeared in the doorway. "Grandpa, may I come in?" she asked tentatively. "Of course. Come in." I was surprised and pleased. My granddaughter had rarely sought my company since they arrived. Sophie entered and stopped awkwardly in the middle of the room, looking around. I noticed that it was the first time she'd seen what my space had become a warehouse of salvaged items, memories, and things Cassandra had deemed outdated and unnecessary. "Wow," she said, eyeing the stacks of books, albums, and record boxes. "I can see where all the stuff from the living room went." "Not all of it," I answered. "A lot of it your mother just threw away." Sophie grimaced and sat on the edge of the bed. "Grandpa, I came to warn you." Something in her voice made me alert. "About what I overheard my parents talking." She lowered her eyes. "Mom's decided her parents are moving here. Grandma Evelyn and Grandpa Victor. They're selling their house in Provincetown." I felt a chill run through me. Even if the house were twice as big, there wouldn't be room for everyone. But it wasn't just about space. "Where do they plan to put them?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "That's why I came." Sophie fidgeted with the edge of her t-shirt. "Mom and Dad think you'd be better off somewhere else." "What other place?" My voice trembled, though I tried to stay calm. "A retirement home." Sophie squeezed out. "They've already found some place in Hyannis and put down a deposit. They say you'll be taken care of by professionals and won't have to worry about cooking and cleaning and all that." I felt the anger rising in me like a wave. Nathan and Cassandra were planning to evict me from my own home to make room for her parents. "When are they going to tell me about this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Tonight," she answered. "They're waiting for Liam to come back from his interview. They want the whole family together. Except for me, I suppose." I grinned bitterly. "I'm not part of the family anymore. Am I, Grandpa?" "Don't say that," Sophie objected. "It's just they think it's best for everyone. Mom says you can't live alone anymore, and they're too busy to take care of you." "Take care of me?" I rose from my chair, feeling a surge of energy from indignation. "I've been taking care of myself for 79 years. I worked as a postal clerk for 45 years, raised your father, built this house with your grandmother, Margaret, and now they think I'm an incompetent old man who should be put in a nursing home." Sophie looked startled by my outburst. She'd never seen me angry before. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "I'm sorry, Sophie," I said more quietly. "I'm grateful you warned me. At least I'll have time to prepare." "What are you going to do?" she asked anxiously. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "But I'm not going to give up without a fight." In the evening, just as Sophie had predicted, Nathan called a family council in the living room. I sat in my old armchair, the only thing in the room Cassandra couldn't throw away because I refused to get up from it when she tried to move it, and watched the faces of my relatives. Nathan looked tense. Cassandra was tapping her foot impatiently on the floor. Liam was staring at his phone, pretending he wasn't there, and Sophie was avoiding looking me in the eye. "Dad," Nathan began after a long pause, "we want to talk to you about the future." "My future," I clarified, looking him straight in the eye. "Or the future of this house." Nathan hesitated, but Cassandra took the initiative. "Jeremiah," she said in that tone one uses with a cranky child, "we can all see that you are finding it hard to live alone. You forget to take your medication. You don't eat properly. Your house is in a state of disrepair. We're worried about you." Really, I couldn't help but be sarcastic. "I thought you were worried about where to put your parents." Cassandra flinched, and Nathan cast a quick glance at Sophie, who shrank back in her seat. "Dad, let's be honest," Nathan said. "Yes, Cassandra's parents are selling their house and moving closer to us. But that's a separate issue. We're really concerned about your health and safety. So much so that you've decided to evict me from my own home." I could feel my hands shaking with anger, but I tried to speak calmly. "We found the perfect place," Cassandra interjected. "Seaside Haven is not just a nursing home, but a real community for active retirees. There's a pool, a library, organized excursions." I knew she was lying, Seaside Haven was the cheapest retirement home in the area with minimal services and a bad reputation. I'd read about it in the local paper. It was constantly understaffed, and the building needed renovation. "I'm not going anywhere," I said firmly. "This is my home, and I'm staying here." "Dad, be reasonable." Nathan leaned forward. "You can't live here alone, and we can't look after you all the time. We have our own lives. Work. Children." "I didn't ask you to look after me," I reminded him. "You came here and decided you could run my life. And now you want to get rid of me to make room for Cassandra's parents." "Jeremiah." Cassandra was outraged. "How can you say that we are only thinking of your welfare?" "Then leave me alone," I replied. "Go away and let me live as I did before you came." "That is impossible," Nathan said. "We have already decided everything. You're moving to Seaside Haven in 4 days. And if I refuse," I straightened in my chair, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. "Dad, don't make this harder than it has to be." Nathan sighed. "You realize it's inevitable. At your age, sooner or later, everyone has to move into a retirement home. It's better to do it now while you're still active enough to get used to the new place." I looked at my son and didn't recognize him. When did he become such a cold, calculating man? Where was the boy I taught to ride his bike, the boy I read bedtime stories to, the boy I comforted after his first heartbreak? "This is my home," I repeated. "I'm not going anywhere." "If you don't go voluntarily," Cassandra said with ill-concealed irritation, "we'll have to get a guardianship. Nathan has already consulted a lawyer. At your age, the testimony of a couple of doctors would be enough to declare you in need of guardianship." I felt a chill go down my spine. They threatened to take away not only my home, but my right to control my own life. "Would you do that to your father?" I asked Nathan, not believing my ears. He looked away. "Dad, don't bring it up. Just agree to move in, and everything will be fine." I realized I had lost this fight. They were willing to do anything to evict me, and they had the advantage: youth, legal knowledge, resources. I had nothing but my stubbornness and sense of injustice. "Okay," I finally said. "I'll go to that retirement home of yours, but don't think I'll ever forgive you for that." The next 4 days passed like a blur. I watched Cassandra and Nathan pack my things, deciding for me what I would need in the retirement home and what was unnecessary. Most of my books, my stamp collection that I had collected all my life. Many of my photographs were all declared unnecessary and sent to the garage for storage. I could only take my clothes, a few personal items, and photos with me. The rooms at Seaside Haven were small, and a lot of stuff wouldn't fit there. Sophie tried to help me by sneaking things into my suitcase that Cassandra had put aside. She was the only one who seemed genuinely upset about what was happening. "Grandpa, I'm so sorry," she whispered as she helped me pack the photo album. "I've tried to talk to Mom and Dad, but they won't listen." "Don't blame yourself, baby," I replied, stroking her head. "You couldn't change anything." The day of the move, I woke up early and walked out to the backyard. The fog had not yet cleared over the ocean, and the water seemed silvery in the morning light. I stood there for a long time, soaking up the view that had been a part of my life for so many years. Margaret and I loved to sit on the veranda on summer evenings, watching the sun set over the ocean, coloring the sky and water in shades of pink and gold. Now, I didn't know if I would ever see that view again. Nathan found me there an hour later. "Dad, it's time to go," he said, trying to sound cheerful. "The car is already loaded." I nodded and took one last look at the ocean before turning and walking toward the house. Nathan's SUV was parked by the porch. 2 suitcases and a box were loaded in the trunk. All that was left of my life. Cassandra was fussing around, checking if everything was locked. if we'd forgotten anything. She looked almost happy, as if getting rid of me was a great relief. "Jeremiah," she said as I approached the car, "don't forget your pills. I put them in the side pocket of your suitcase and made an appointment schedule. You'll give it to the nurse when we get there." I didn't answer, just sat in the back seat next to Sophie. Liam had stayed home. He had some important appointment. He explained. I was even glad he hadn't come. At least there would be one less witness to my humiliation. The drive to Seaside Haven took about 40 minutes. I looked out the window at the familiar places whizzing by the post office where I worked, the park where I walked with Margaret, the store where I bought her flowers every Friday, and felt a part of me die. Seaside Haven turned out to be exactly what I expected. A dreary, 4-story gray brick building surrounded by stunted trees and a neatly trimmed but lifeless lawn. Not a trace of that active retirement community Cassandra had spoken of. Through the windows, I could see elderly people sitting in chairs in the common room, staring mindlessly at the TV. "It looks nice," Sophie said uncertainly as we got out of the car. "Don't pretend." "Baby," I replied quietly. "We both know what this place is." We were greeted by the receptionist, a plump, middle-aged woman with a strained smile and tired eyes. She walked us through the check-in process, showed us to my room, a small space with a narrow bed, nightstand, and closet, and handed us a schedule of meals and medications. "Dinner is at 5:30, she said, looking at her papers. "Not at me. Don't be late, or you'll have to wait until breakfast." Nathan and Cassandra helped me put my things away, which took only a few minutes. So few were there. Then came the moment of farewell. "Dad." Nathan looked awkward. "We'll be visiting you. Maybe not right away. We need to help Cassandra's parents with the move, but we'll definitely come soon." I didn't answer. What could I say that I didn't want to see them? That the betrayal was unforgivable? That they had ruined my life for their own convenience? Sophie hugged me tightly, and I felt her tears wet my shirt. "I'll come visit you, Grandpa," she whispered. "I promise, I know, baby," I replied, stroking her back. "Take care of yourself." When they left, I sat on the edge of the bed, and for the first time in a while I let myself cry. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I stared at the bare walls of the strange room that was now my home. The first week at Seaside Haven was the worst week of my life. The food was bland, the regimen was oppressive, and the community was depressing. Most of the residents were significantly older than me or had serious health problems. Some suffered from dementia and didn't even recognize their own children who came to visit them. I spent most of my time in my room, reading the few books I managed to take with me or looking at photographs. Sometimes I would go out to the common room and look out the window at the parking lot, hoping to see Sophie's car, but it never arrived. On the 12th day of my stay at Seaside Haven, something happened that changed everything. I was sitting in the dining hall trying to swallow something called chicken stew, but more like glue, when I heard a familiar voice. Jeremiah. Jeremiah Cole. It couldn't be. I looked up and saw a tall, skinny man with a gray beard looking at me with genuine surprise. Leonard. I couldn't believe my eyes. Leonard Price Leonard had been a co-worker of mine at the Postal Service and then moved on to work at the bank. We'd been friends for years, but lost touch after his wife died when he moved in with his daughter in Boston. "What the hell are you doing in this place?" he asked, taking a seat across from me. My loving son decided I belonged here. I grinned bitterly. "And you, I've been here for 9 months." Leonard replied, "After my second stroke, my daughter decided she couldn't take care of me. I was too weak to argue." We talked all through lunch and sat in the common room for a long time afterward. Leonard told me about his life after the move, how his daughter had sold his house, how he had lost most of his belongings, and how he had gradually come to terms with his new reality. "But you," he said, looking at me carefully, You're still strong. You walk on your own. Your head is clear. Your hands are not shaking. What about your house? I told him the whole story. How Nathan and Cassandra had invaded my life. How they had gradually forced me out of my own house. How they had finally evicted me to make room for Cassandra's parents. And the house belongs to them now, Leonard asked when I had finished. No. I shook my head. That's the irony of it. The house is still registered to me. Nathan should have deeded it to me 3 years ago. But he kept putting it off because he didn't want to pay the gift tax. Said he'd get around to it. That it was better to wait until until you passed away. Leonard said bluntly. He was always a man who called things by their proper names. Exactly. I nodded. And as long as the house is listed as mine, they just use it. Leonard rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Jeremiah, he said after a pause, if the house is legally yours, you can do whatever you want with it. Like sell it. Sell it, I'd never thought of that. The house was a part of me. The place where I spent most of my life. Where my memories were kept. Think about it. Leonard leaned closer. Your son and daughter-in-law threw you away like you were nothing. They live in your house, use your possessions, and they sent you here to die. Why not teach them a lesson? I was beginning to see where he was going with this. Are you suggesting I sell the house out from under their noses? I asked, feeling something like hope stirring in my chest. Exactly. Leonard smiled broadly. I spent 35 years in a bank. Jeremiah, I know how these things work. If the house is in your name, you have every right to sell it. They don't even have to know about it until the deal is finalized. I pictured Nathan and Cassandra's faces when they found out they could no longer live in my house. It would be the perfect revenge. But where would I go? I asked. Even if I sell the house, I still need somewhere to live. And there might not be enough money for a new place given the prices right now. I've thought about that too. Leonard squinted slightly. My nephew has a real estate agency in Hyannis. He might be able to help you find a buyer who will agree to let you live in a guest house or an annex. Many wealthy people are looking for property in Cape Cod and are willing to agree to different terms just to get a good house. I could feel a plan starting to form in my head. This could work. I could regain control of my life and at the same time take revenge on those who had betrayed me. Leonard, I said, looking at my old friend with renewed determination. Tell me more about this nephew, as promised. Leonard introduced me to his nephew, Marcus Price, the very next day. Marcus was an energetic man of about 47 with shrewd eyes and a keen gaze that made me think of the sharks I had sometimes seen off the coast. He had come to Seaside Haven on the pretext of visiting his uncle, and we met in the little garden behind the building, where residents did not usually go due to lack of benches and shade. Uncle Leonard has told me your situation. Mr. Cole, said Marcus, after we had exchanged greetings, and I think I can help you. Do you really think anyone would be willing to buy a house with such an encumbrance as I am? I asked bluntly. I'd been thinking about Leonard's plan all night, and I doubted its feasibility. Marcus smiled, showing perfect teeth that were obviously expensive. Mr. Cole, you underestimate the appeal of real estate in Cape Cod. Prices there have risen 35% in the last 3 years. A house overlooking the ocean with a lot like that. Believe me, there will be buyers willing to make any kind of offer. But wouldn't my son be able to contest the sale? That was my biggest fear. He lives there. If the house is officially registered in your name, and there are no documents restricting your right to dispose of it, such as a life annuity or a gift with the right to reside, then legally you have every right to sell it. Your son can only challenge the sale if he can prove that you are incapacitated or acting under duress. That's why they put me here. I grinned bitterly. To make it easier to prove my incapacity later. That's why we need to act quickly and carefully. Marcus nodded. I'll prepare the paperwork, find buyers, and we'll do the inspections while your son is at work. No one will know about the sale until the contract is signed and registered. And how would we organize the inspections? I couldn't imagine secretly showing the house to potential buyers while Nathan and Cassandra were at work. I'm locked in here. Do you have keys to the house? Marcus asked. I nodded. When they brought me to Seaside Haven, I had put a bunch of keys in my jacket pocket, and no one had thought to take them. That's great. I'll organize day trips for you. Officially, it's part of a socialization program for residents. They take groups to shopping malls, museums, parks. It's common practice in these facilities. I'll make arrangements with the administration to include you in these trips, and I'll be waiting outside in my car. The plan sounded like a spy operation, and part of me couldn't believe that I, a 79-year-old retired postal clerk, was seriously considering such a venture. But the other part, the part that still remembered the humiliation of being banished from my own home, yearned for justice. What if Nathan or Cassandra are home during the inspection? I always make sure the path is clear beforehand, Marcus replied confidently. It's standard practice in my business. Sometimes I have to sell houses where spouses are divorcing and one doesn't want to sell. Believe me, I know how to handle it delicately. We agreed that Marcus would start the paperwork immediately. I needed to provide him with a copy of the property certificate, which fortunately I always kept in an envelope along with other important documents in my wallet. The foresight I had developed from years of dealing with postal mail had served me well for the first time in a long time. 4 days later, Marcus called me on the Seaside Haven phone and informed me that the paperwork was ready. The house was for sale. No address, just neighborhood and features, and there were several interested buyers. You have your first tour tomorrow. Mr. Cole, he said. I've made arrangements with the administration. You'll be marked for a trip to the botanical gardens. Marcus. I lowered my voice, though there was no one else in the room. Aren't you afraid that this is, well, not quite legal, I mean, deceiving the administration? Secret meetings, Mr. Cole. He sounded absolutely certain. You're a fully capable citizen temporarily residing in a care facility. You have the right to privacy and to manage your property. If the administration thinks you're traveling to look at flowers, but you're instead touring your property with potential buyers, that's your right. No one is keeping you under house arrest. His words gave me confidence. Indeed, I had done nothing illegal. I was simply disposing of my property as I saw fit. The next day, I put on my best and only suit, which Cassandra had allowed me to bring, and joined a group of elderly people waiting for a bus to go to the botanical gardens. When the bus pulled up, I discreetly separated from the group and made my way to a black sedan parked around the corner of the building. Nice day for a real estate tour. Isn't it? Marcus smiled as he opened the car door for me. On the way to my house, Marcus told me about the first potential buyer, a middle-aged couple from Boston looking for a vacation home. They're willing to pay a good price, but they want to completely remodel the interior. This means that all of your stuff left in the house will have to be moved out. Most of my things are already in the garage thanks to Cassandra's efforts, I said bitterly. Nathan promised they'd keep them for me, but I doubt they'll fulfill that promise. We could include a clause in the contract about keeping and giving you the personal effects, Marcus suggested. Or we could arrange for removal before the deal is finalized. When we arrived at the house, Marcus drove by first, scrutinizing the lot. Your son's car is gone, he noted. But there's another car in the driveway. Cassandra must be home. I felt disappointed. Or her parents had already moved in. Let's check it out. Marcus pulled out his cell phone and dialed a number. Hello? This is Clearflow Plumbing. We've received a request for a plumbing inspection in your neighborhood. Is someone going to be home in the next 2 hours? He listened to the answer and smiled at me. I see. Thank you very much. Then we'll come tomorrow. He disconnected. No one's home. It's a neighbor's car. They left it in your driveway while their own was being repaired. The woman who answered the phone said everyone was gone for the day. Your son at work. Your daughter-in-law and her parents at a furniture store in Provincetown picking out new bedroom furniture. For my bedroom, I clarified, feeling anger rising inside. Don't worry, they'll be picking out furniture for a whole other house soon. Marcus winked and turned the car around. We have about 4 hours before they get back. More than enough time to look around. The couple from Boston, the Harrisons, were waiting for us nearby at a coffee shop. They were exactly as I'd imagined, groomed, self-assured, with that peculiar expression on their faces that comes from people used to getting what they want. Mrs. Harrison looked at the house with the meticulousness of someone willing to spend a lot of money and expecting perfection. The layout is decent, but it's so outdated, she said, running her finger along the kitchen countertop. We're going to have to completely remodel the kitchen and the bathrooms, too. The view of the ocean is fantastic. Mr. Harrison said, looking out the living room window, and the lot is spacious enough. We could add a pool. I watched in silence as strangers discussed the future of my home, planning to tear down and rebuild the rooms where most of my life had been spent. It was painful, but also liberating. I began to realize that a home is just walls and a roof. Real memories live inside me, and no one can take them away or rebuild them. The Harrisons stayed in the house for about an hour, asking many questions about utilities, the age of the roof, and the condition of the foundation. Marcus answered professionally, occasionally turning to me for clarification. At the end of the inspection, Mrs. Harrison turned to me. Mr. Cole, your agent mentioned that you would like to retain the right to stay in the guest house. But I don't see a guest house here. It's not here yet, I admitted. But there's plenty of room on the property to build one. She frowned. I'm afraid that complicates things. We were planning to use the house for vacations, not to share the lot with. She faltered, not wanting to say the obvious. An elderly person. I understand. I nodded. Maybe we're not right for each other. On the way back to Seaside Haven, I shared my doubts with Marcus. Maybe the guest house idea isn't realistic. Who would want to buy a house with that kind of encumbrance? The Harrisons aren't the only potential buyers, Marcus said confidently. Tomorrow we have an appointment with another client who I think would be a better fit. He's not just looking for a vacation home, but plans to move to Cape Cod permanently. The next day brought another field trip, this time officially to the local history museum. Marcus was again waiting for me around the corner, and we drove to the house, making sure no one was there beforehand. William Foster was nothing like I'd expected. Instead of the typical rich businessman in an expensive suit, I saw a tall, trim man of about 57 dressed in simple slacks and a shirt with the sleeves rolled up. His graying temples and tanned face with wrinkles at the corners of his eyes suggested a man used to spending time outdoors. Mr. Cole. He shook my hand firmly. It's a pleasure to meet you. Marcus told me your story, and I admire your determination. Unlike the Harrisons, William looked at the house not as a potential renovation project, but as a future home. He asked questions about the neighbors, how the neighborhood had changed over the years, and was interested in the history of the house and our lives with Margaret. I've dreamed of a house by the water my whole life, he said as we walked out into the backyard. For the last 35 years, I've run a chain of hotels in the Northeast. Started with one motel that I inherited from my father and gradually expanded the business. Last year, I sold the company to a major corporation, and now I can afford to live where I've always wanted to live. And you're not uncomfortable with the guest house clause? I asked bluntly. Not at all. William smiled. You know, Mr. Cole, when I was a boy, my grandfather lived with us. He had a small annex to the house, just one room with a bathroom and a tiny kitchen. But the place was magical to me. My grandfather told me stories about the war, taught me how to fish, showed me how to fix different things. When he was gone, I missed him and those times very much. He looked around the lot, calculating something in his mind. Here in the far corner, you could build a nice guest house with a separate entrance, but close to the main house. 2 bedrooms, living room, kitchen, maybe even a small terrace overlooking the ocean. What do you think? It sounds almost perfect, I admitted, trying not to show how touched I was by his words. I'm not suggesting you be my grandfather. William laughed, noticing my embarrassment. But I do appreciate life experiences and stories. And I also like the idea of having someone in the house who knows its history, who has cared for it for years. It gives a place soul. You know, I did. And for the first time since Nathan and Cassandra showed up on my doorstep with suitcases, I felt hopeful. After the inspection, William made an offer that exceeded the market value of the house by 20%, on the condition that he would build me a guest house to my specifications, and I would have the right to live there for life. In addition, he insisted on including a clause in the contract to ensure that I have access to all my personal belongings stored in the house and garage until the deal is finalized. I want it to be fair, he said. Your son and daughter-in-law have done you an injustice, but I don't want our deal to be marred by any legal disputes in the future. Over the next week, Marcus organized several more tours during which William and I discussed the details of the deal and met with a lawyer who helped draft and review all the documents. William even brought in an architect to discuss the plans for the guest house. Construction will take about 4 months, the architect said, showing me the preliminary sketches. But you'll love the result. The house will be completely self-contained with its own heating and air conditioning system, a modern kitchen, and a bathroom adapted for your age. I looked at the blueprints and could see my future. Not a dull room in Seaside Haven, but a cozy house overlooking the ocean where I could spend my remaining years with dignity and comfort. Finally, 3 weeks after our first meeting, all the paperwork was ready. We met at the lawyer's office in Hyannis, and I signed the purchase agreement. William handed me a check for the down payment, and the rest of the money was to be deposited into my account after the transaction was registered. Congratulations, Mr. Cole, said the lawyer, shaking my hand. The deal will be registered within 4 working days. After that, the house will officially become Mr. Foster's property. What about my son and his family? I asked. Would they have to move out according to the law? The new owner can demand to vacate the premises within 30 days after the registration of the transaction. The lawyer replied, but that's at Mr. Foster's discretion. I think 30 days is a fair time limit. William nodded. That's enough time to find a new place to live. When we left the office, I felt a strange relief mixed with anxiety. The plan had worked. I'd sold the house, secured my future, and taught Nathan and Cassandra a lesson. But how would they react when they found out? What will I tell them when I meet them? Don't worry, Mr. Cole, said William, as if he had read my thoughts. I'll be there when you tell them the news. Together, we can handle any reaction. Thank you, Mr. Foster. I thanked him sincerely. For everything. Please call me William. He smiled. After all, we'll be neighbors now. On the drive back to Seaside Haven, I looked out the window at the passing scenery and thought about how dramatically my life had changed in those 3 weeks. I had gone from a rejected, humiliated old man to a man in control of his own destiny. I sold the house that had become my prison and secured a new future for myself. All thanks to a chance meeting with Leonard and his nephew. As Marcus dropped me off at Seaside Haven, I noticed Nathan's car in the parking lot. My heart skipped a beat. Had he really found out about the sale, but that was impossible. The paperwork hadn't been filed yet. Marcus, I pointed to the car. That's my son. Don't worry, he reassured me. Most likely it's a normal visit. Maybe he finally decided to visit you like he promised. I nodded, though I didn't believe it. Nathan hadn't visited me once since he'd placed me in Seaside Haven. Even Sophie, who had promised to visit, hadn't shown up. What should I tell him, I asked, feeling uncertain. Nothing yet, Marcus advised. The deal has not yet been registered. It would be better to wait for official confirmation before making a statement. Mr. Foster and I will come to pick you up in 4 days when it's done. I walked into the building, preparing for my meeting with my son and not knowing what it would bring. But there was a certainty inside me. No matter what happened, I was no longer a helpless victim. I was back in control of my life. Nathan did come to visit me, though visit is too strong a word for what actually happened. He spent less than 40 minutes at Seaside Haven, mostly complaining about work and asking how I was feeling, as if I were on my deathbed. Not a word about when I would be taken home. Not a hint that my exile might ever end. Before he left, he mentioned casually, "By the way, Dad, we're having a little celebration this Sunday. It's the birthday of Cassandra's father, Victor. He's turning 70. And you're having the party at my house." I couldn't contain the bitterness in my voice. Nathan frowned, as if my words had caught him off guard. Well, technically, it's still your house. Yes, but you don't mind, do you? After all, we live there, and Cassandra's parents are there now, too. Already moved in. I knew the answer, but I wanted to hear it from him. Yes. Last week. He looked a little guilty, but quickly composed himself. They sold their house in Provincetown and are now living with us. We remodeled the rooms upstairs a bit. I hope you don't mind. I thought about the papers I had signed 4 days ago, the check that was in Marcus's safe, the plans for the guest house that the architect had shown me. All these were my secrets, my little revenge for the betrayal. And the moment to reveal it was at hand. I don't mind. I lied with a smile. It's a big house with plenty of room for everyone. Nathan relaxed visibly, clearly relieved by my sudden compliance. That's good. I knew you'd understand. It's only temporary until we... He stammered, not wanting to finish. Until you can find me a better place than Seaside Haven, I suggested, keeping my tone friendly. Exactly. He nodded, not recognizing the irony. Cassandra and I are looking at better options. Seaside Haven is certainly not the place where you should be spending your... He paused again. The rest of my days, I prompted. I meant to say the near future. Nathan smiled awkwardly. When he left, I sat at the window for a long time, looking out at the parking lot and thinking about the upcoming Sunday. Marcus had promised that the paperwork would be filed by Saturday, and William and I had planned a visit on Sunday morning. But now that I'd heard about the party, I thought it might be even better to announce the news in front of all the guests. Let Nathan and Cassandra experience the same public humiliation I had experienced when I was evicted from my own home. I called Marcus from Leonard's phone and told him about the conversation with my son. It could be good for us. Marcus agreed after a moment's thought. If all the guests are already in the house, it will be harder for Nathan and Cassandra to make a scene. They'll want to save face. How do we explain my appearance, I asked. They didn't invite me to the party. Mr. Foster can call ahead and say he wants to see the house as a potential buyer. They don't know it's already sold. Let's say it's urgent, that he flew in from out of town and can only make time on Sunday. It was a risky plan, but I liked it. For the first time in a long time, I felt a rush of adrenaline and excitement, feelings that I thought had forever left me as I got older. Saturday came and went, and with it the last formalities of the paperwork. Marcus called me that evening and confirmed that the deal was officially registered. The house was no longer mine. It belonged to William Foster. I called your son. Marcus said, I introduced myself as Mr. Foster's agent and said that my client was very interested in buying their house and would like to see it tomorrow around 3:00 in the afternoon. And what did Nathan say? I nervously imagined the conversation. At first, he was very surprised and said the house was not for sale. I apologized for the misunderstanding and explained that there must have been an error in our database. But then I added that Mr. Foster was willing to offer a sum well above the market value, and your son was interested. You bet. I grinned. Nathan never missed an opportunity to make money. He said they were having a family reunion tomorrow, but they could spare 40 minutes before the event. I confirmed the appointment for 3:00. Mr. Foster and I will pick you up from Seaside Haven at 2:30. I barely slept that night, replaying the scene in my head. How would Nathan react when he found out the house was sold? What would Cassandra say, and her parents? I was both scared and excited at the same time. In the morning, I shaved thoroughly, put on my only suit, and polished my old shoes. I wanted to look dignified at the moment of my triumph. At precisely 2:30, Marcus and William Foster were waiting for me at the entrance to Seaside Haven. William was dressed in an immaculate gray suit, but he wore it with a careless elegance that made him look like a man accustomed to expensive things. Ready for the big day? Jeremiah, he asked, shaking my hand. Ready as ever, I replied, feeling my heart pounding. On the way to the house, we discussed our plan once more. William would play the role of interested buyer until we were inside the house. Then I would announce the truth. Don't make any sudden moves, Marcus warned. Your son may try to challenge the deal, claiming that you were incapacitated or pressured. Don't give him a reason. I'll be reasonable, I promised, though a storm of emotions raged inside me. When we pulled up to the house, I saw that preparations for the party were already in full swing. Several cars were parked in the driveway, and people in catering company uniforms were bustling around the entrance, unloading boxes of food and drinks. Looks like it's going to be a big party, William said, parking his luxury car next to the others. We got out of the car and headed toward the house. I could feel my knees shaking, but I tried to walk straight and steady. Marcus walked beside me, ready to support me if necessary. Nathan opened the door, wearing a half-unbuttoned shirt and holding a towel, clearly in the midst of preparations. Mr. Price. He held out his hand to Marcus. Thanks for letting me know you were coming. We're having a celebration tonight, so there's not much time. He paused, noticing me standing just behind Marcus and William. His eyes widened, and the hand he held out for a handshake froze in midair. Dad. He looked as if he'd seen a ghost. What are you doing here, hello? Nathan. I tried to make my voice sound calm and confident. I've come to visit my home, or rather my former home. What are you talking about? Nathan looked from me to Marcus and William, clearly trying to figure out what was going on. Allow me to introduce myself. William stepped in, extending his hand. William Foster, the new owner of this house. The new what? Nathan shook the outstretched hand, but his face was full of bewilderment. Nathan, who is it? Cassandra appeared from the back of the house, dressed in an elegant dress with her hair and makeup done. She froze when she saw me. Jeremiah, what's going on? Why don't we go inside and discuss it? Marcus suggested. I'm sure neither of us wants to attract unnecessary attention. Nathan stepped back silently, letting us into the house. Inside, everything was ready for the party. A long table in the living room covered with a white tablecloth and filled with plates and glasses, flowers and candles everywhere, and classical music playing softly from the speakers. "Explain what's going on," Nathan demanded when we were all in the living room. "It's very simple," I answered. "I sold the house to Mr. Foster. The deed was registered yesterday. You must vacate the premises within 30 days. There was a deafening silence. Cassandra looked at me as if I had just announced that I had come from another planet. Nathan slowly turned pale, and then his face began to flush. Is this some kind of joke? His voice shook with restrained anger. You couldn't sell the house. You're in a retirement home. You a fully capable citizen with the right to dispose of his property. Marcus finished for him. The house was in Jeremiah Cole's name, and there were no legal restrictions on its sale. That's impossible. Cassandra shook her head. We live here. My parents sold their house to move here. What's going on here? An elderly couple, obviously Victor and Evelyn Pollock, entered the living room. Victor was a tall, gaunt man with a military bearing, and Evelyn was a small but bossy-looking woman with carefully styled gray hair. Who are these people? Mom, Dad, Cassandra turned to them, her voice trailing off. This is Jeremiah, Nathan's father. He says he sold the house. Sold it? Evelyn looked at me in disbelief. How could he sell the house while he was in a retirement home? Through a realtor like they usually sell houses, I replied, not holding back on the sarcasm. Look, Nathan tried to pull himself together. There must have been a misunderstanding. My father, he doesn't quite know what he's doing. He's old. He has moments of confusion. Moments of confusion. Stop it. Nathan. My voice was firmer than I expected. You know perfectly well that I am of sound mind. You and Cassandra evicted me from my home to put her parents here. You sent me to Seaside Haven, a place that looks more like a warehouse for unwanted old people than a decent place to live. We were going to get you out of there. Nathan objected. We just needed some time to get settled to help Cassandra's parents. Don't lie to me. I shook my head. You never planned to take me away. I became an inconvenience. And you got rid of me. That's outrageous. Evelyn intervened. Nathan, you said your father agreed to move into a retirement home because he needed care. He agreed. Nathan glared at me angrily. And now he's getting revenge. I'm not taking revenge, I countered. I just regained control of my life. Mr. Foster offered me a good price for the house and agreed to build me a guest house on the property where I could live. I'll no longer rot in Seaside Haven, and I'll no longer be at your mercy. A guest house, Cassandra interjected, then turned to William. Are you seriously going to build a cabin for him and let him live on your property? Absolutely. William nodded. That was one of the terms of the deal, and I fully support it. Jeremiah deserves a decent life in a place he loves. This is insane. Nathan shook his head. The deal cannot be legal. My father was in a care facility. He could not make such decisions on his own. Here's a copy of the purchase agreement. Marcus pulled a folder of documents out of his briefcase. And here's an extract from the registry confirming the registration of the transaction. It's all perfectly legal. Jeremiah was declared fully capable by an independent doctor before signing the papers. Nathan grabbed the papers and began frantically flipping through them, as if hoping to find some mistake or loophole. It's impossible, he mumbled. How could you? At that moment, the doorbell rang. Cassandra shuddered and looked at her watch. My God, it's the guests. They're beginning to arrive. And we have here this. Maybe we should cancel the party, suggested Victor, who had been silent until now, watching the drama unfold. Cancel it. Evelyn looked as if he had suggested something obscene. Impossible. Everyone is on their way. The food is ordered. The musicians are paid for. Then you'll have to host and pretend everything's all right, I said. Mister, Foster and I won't spoil your party. We just wanted to tell you the news in person and discuss the timeline for vacating the house. Vacating the house, Cassandra raised her voice. You want to evict us, your son, your grandchildren. Where would we go? The same place you sent me, I answered calmly. You'll find a place to live that suits your abilities. You have 30 days, much more time than you gave me to pack. The doorbell rang again, more insistently. Cassandra gave me a searing look and went to open the door. We're going to contest this deal, Nathan hissed when she left. You couldn't have made those decisions on your own. You were placed in a care facility because of your condition. What condition? Nathan, I looked him straight in the eye. You know yourself that I was perfectly healthy when you sent me to Seaside Haven. My only condition is that I was a hindrance to your plans. The first guest entered the living room. An elderly couple I didn't know. They stopped in the doorway, clearly sensing the tension in the room. Is this a bad time? The man asked uncertainly. No, come in. Cassandra returned to the living room with a strained smile. We were just discussing family matters. Meet Nathan's father, Jeremiah, and his friends. Business associates, William corrected, nodding politely. The next 40 minutes passed in a strange, tense atmosphere. The guests kept arriving. Cassandra and Nathan tried to pretend that everything was all right. But their fake smiles and nervous glances betrayed the true state of affairs. Evelyn was whispering arguments with Victor in the corner of the room, occasionally throwing angry glances at me. I watched it all with a feeling close to satisfaction. Not gloating, but more like relief that justice had finally been served. They had thrown me out of my life like waste, and now they were facing the same uncertainty themselves. Finally, when there were about 25 guests in the house, William came to me. I think our message has been delivered, he said quietly. Shall we leave them to digest the news? I nodded, feeling suddenly tired. The emotional strain of the last few hours had taken its toll. William, Marcus, and I headed for the exit. Nathan intercepted us at the door. This isn't over, he said, lowering his voice so the guests wouldn't hear. I will fight for this house. You can't just throw us out on the street. I'm not throwing you out on the street, I replied calmly. You have 30 days to find a new place to live. And unlike you, I'm not forbidding you to take all your things. You'll regret it, he said, his eyes openly threatening. I've already regretted a lot of things. Nathan, I said, feeling my heart clench. I regretted not seeing the man you'd become. I regret letting you and Cassandra manipulate me. But I will never regret taking back control of my life. I left the house without looking back. William and Marcus followed me. When we got into the car, I finally let myself breathe. Are you all right? Jeremiah William asked, looking at me with concern. Yes, I replied, surprised at how truthful my answer was. I'm fine. For the first time in a long time, I was really okay. As we drove away from the house, I saw Nathan standing on the porch in the rearview mirror, staring after us. His face was contorted with anger, but behind that anger, I could see fear, the fear of a man who had suddenly lost control of the situation and didn't know what to do next. It was exactly the feeling I had experienced when they had taken me to Seaside Haven. And while I didn't consider myself a vengeful person, I couldn't help but recognize that in that moment the circle had closed. Where to now? Marcus asked, pulling out onto the main road. To Seaside Haven, I replied. I have to pack, and then I'll be waiting for my new house to be ready. Don't worry about the timing, William said. I've already contacted the contractors. We'll start building the guest house next week. In the meantime, you can move into a hotel at my expense. Of course. Thank you. I looked at him gratefully for everything. As we drove back to Seaside Haven, I thought about the look on Nathan and Cassandra's faces when they found out the house had been sold, about the panic in Evelyn's eyes when she realized they would have to move again, about the ruined holiday they had planned in my now former home. I didn't feel schadenfreude. No. But I felt satisfaction that justice had been done. They wanted to get rid of me, write me off, forget me. But I had shown them that I was still a force to be reckoned with. A new chapter of my life was ahead. In a small but private house, overlooking the ocean I loved so much. No neglect, no humiliation, no having to obey other people's rules. I smiled at my thoughts. Perhaps 79 years isn't so old when there is so much to live for ahead. The days following our visit to the party turned into a real war. Nathan called me at Seaside Haven several times a day, alternately threatening lawsuits and begging me to come to my senses. He hired a lawyer to try to find loopholes in the purchase agreement. But Marcus was too experienced to make mistakes in the deal. "Dad, you don't realize what you're doing," Nathan said during one of the calls. "You've left us homeless. Where are we going to go now? We have children. We have Cassandra's parents. You have good salaries," I answered calmly. "You can rent an apartment or a house like millions of other people do." But the house was practically ours. He sounded indignant. "You promised to leave it to us as an inheritance." That phrase opened my eyes to the real reason for his anger. It wasn't that they had no place to live. Nathan and Cassandra could afford to rent or even buy a house. It was that they already thought of the house as theirs, already planned what they would do with it after I died. And I ruined their plans. "I never promised to leave the house to you," I reminded him. "I said I would make sure my estate was divided fairly between you and your sister." Abigail, my daughter, lived in California and visited me infrequently, but she always called on holidays and sent pictures of her grandchildren. She had no claim on the house and never tried to interfere in my life. I decided long ago that she would get an equal share of my inheritance, although Nathan always felt he should get more since he took care of me. "Abigail doesn't even visit you," Nathan exclaimed. "She lives on the other side of the country and comes once every 6 years. At least she didn't send me to a retirement home to make room for her family." I countered. After that conversation, Nathan changed tactics. 3 days later, Cassandra and the grandchildren arrived at Seaside Haven. Liam looked annoyed and showed he'd been forced to come. But Sophie seemed genuinely happy to see me. "Grandpa," she hugged me when we met in the common room. "I missed you so much." "I missed you too, baby," I replied, touched by her warmth. "How are you doing in college?" "I'm good." She smiled. "I got an excellent grade on my economics project. You know, I'm studying finance." Right, I didn't know that. In all the time I lived with them, no one had ever mentioned that Sophie was studying finance. Cassandra sat next to me, smiling strangely and occasionally intervening with awkward compliments. "Jeremiah, you look great. This retirement home is clearly doing you good. It has such a cozy atmosphere." She looked around the dreary common room of Seaside Haven as if she were in a luxury resort. "Don't pretend. Cassandra," I said bluntly, "we both know this place is awful. That's why I'm so glad I'm moving out of here soon." About that, she lowered her voice and leaned closer. "Nathan and I have been thinking. Maybe you should renegotiate with this Meister, Foster. We could buy the house back as soon as we find the funds. In the meantime, you could come home and live with us like before." I could hardly contain my laughter. Like before. That meant in a small room on the first floor with no say in matters, with constant humiliation and complaints. "Thank you, but I prefer my new plan." I replied. They've already started building the guest house. It will be ready in 3.5 months. 3.5 months, Cassandra sounded disbelieving. And where will you live in the meantime? William rented me an apartment in Hyannis. I couldn't help but smile at the shocked look on her face. Overlooking the ocean. I'm moving in tomorrow. But that's crazy, she exclaimed. Living alone at your age. What if you get sick? What if you fall? Who will take care of you? I've hired a nurse who will come twice a week, I answered. And the rest of the time, I'm quite capable of taking care of myself. I'm not an invalid, Cassandra, despite your attempts to convince everyone otherwise. Cassandra pressed her lips together but said nothing. Sophie watched us with interest, clearly trying to understand the dynamics of the relationship. Grandpa, she said after a pause, can I visit you in your new apartment? I could come on the weekends, help you get settled in. Sure, baby. I was touched by her offer. You're always welcome. Cassandra gave her daughter a disapproving look, but she remained silent. The rest of the visit passed in strained politeness. As they were leaving, Sophie hugged me again and whispered in my ear, I'm glad you won't be living in this horrible place anymore. Grandpa. The next day, I moved into the apartment William had rented for me. It was a spacious one-bedroom apartment in a new building on the coast with large windows, a modern kitchen, and most importantly, no stairs or thresholds. The perfect place for an elderly person. When I walked in there for the first time, I was struck by the feeling of freedom and spaciousness after the cramped room at Seaside Haven. I could cook what I wanted, watch TV when I wanted, shower without waiting in line, and sleep without listening to my neighbor snoring behind a thin wall. William had taken care of everything. The apartment was fully furnished. There was food in the refrigerator, and on the table was a folder of documents, a contract with a caregiver, a schedule of doctor's appointments, emergency numbers, and what surprised me the most, a plan for investing the money from the sale of the house. I took the liberty of bringing in my financial advisor, William explained when he arrived to check on me. She put together several investment portfolio options based on your needs and wants. Nothing risky, mostly safe bonds and dividend stocks. But the income would be steady, more than enough to live comfortably. I was struck by his concern. William didn't treat me as a burden or a second-class person because of my age, but as an equal whose opinions and desires mattered. A week after I moved in, I met with the financial advisor, a young woman named Sarah, who patiently explained various investment strategies to me without using the patronizing tone often used with older people. Mr. Cole, with the amount from the sale of the house and your current savings, you can afford a very comfortable lifestyle, she said, showing me charts and tables. If we put the bulk of the money in this portfolio, you'd be earning 3 times your current expenses each month, and that's without taking into account your pension. As I listened to her, a sense of wonder and joy grew inside me. All my life, I had been frugal, saving money, rarely indulging myself. Now, at 79, I was suddenly wealthy. What am I supposed to do with this money, I asked, looking at the impressive numbers. Sarah smiled. Anything you want, Mr. Cole. Travel, pursue hobbies, help your grandchildren with their studies, buy things you've always wanted but thought were too expensive, live life to the fullest. Living life to the fullest. The phrase stuck in my head. Wasn't that what I'd been deprived of all these years since Margaret's death? Hadn't I become a shadow of myself, existing day after day without real purpose or joy that same evening? I sat down and made a list of things I had always wanted to do but had put off due to lack of money, time, or courage. A trip to Europe, where Margaret and I had always dreamed of visiting, a cruise in the Caribbean, photography courses. I've always loved photography, but never learned it professionally. A new wardrobe. My suits went out of style long ago. A visit to a good restaurant at least once a week. Margaret always said that life is too short not to indulge in good food. Looking at this list made me feel alive for the first time in a long time. I had a purpose, plans for the future, and most importantly, the means to fulfill them. Sophie kept her promise and started visiting me regularly. She came every Saturday, and we spent time together walking along the promenade, eating lunch in cafes, sometimes just sitting on the balcony and talking. She told me about her studies, her plans for the future, her friends and hobbies. I listened to her and thought about how little I knew about my own grandchildren's lives when I lived with them under the same roof. Nathan and Cassandra continued to try to manipulate me. They called, wrote letters, even came unannounced a couple of times, each time with new arguments for why I should help them in their predicament. "Dad, we can't find decent housing in our price range," Nathan complained during one of the visits. "The real estate market is so overheated right now. Maybe you should look for a smaller apartment," I suggested. "You don't need 6 bedrooms anymore. But we have children. We have Cassandra's parents." He resented me. "We can't live in cramped quarters. Liam is already working and can rent his own place," I said. "And Cassandra's parents, as far as I know, got good money from the sale of their house in Provincetown. They can rent or buy something for themselves." Nathan and Cassandra had not expected me to be so well informed about their financial situation. They expected me to take their word for it and make concessions as I had done before. "If you don't care about that, can't you at least think about the inheritance for your grandchildren?" Cassandra changed tactics. "Sophie and Liam deserve a stable future." "I've already taken care of that," I replied. "I put some of the money from the sale of the house into educational trusts for Sophie and Liam. They'll get those funds when they graduate and are ready to start living on their own." This was another piece of advice from Sarah that I gladly accepted. The educational trusts were structured so that neither Nathan nor Cassandra could access them. The money was solely for education and seed money for the grandchildren. Nathan and Cassandra's faces lengthened. They clearly expected to be able to control whatever funds I set aside for the grandchildren. "But what about us?" Nathan finally asked. "We are your family, your children. Won't you leave anything to us?" I looked at my son and his wife, trying to find some genuine concern or love in their faces. But all I saw was greed and irritation. "I've already given you more than you deserve," I said calmly. "You've lived in my house, used my things, run my life. Now it's my turn to live for myself." After that conversation, their visits became less frequent, and their calls shorter. They realized that they could no longer manipulate me and gradually gave up trying to get money. Meanwhile, the construction of the guest house was progressing faster than planned. William regularly sent me photos and videos of the site, consulted me on the interior design, color scheme, and furniture arrangement. He was as enthusiastic about the project as if he was building a house for himself. "I've always dreamed of having a big family," he confided one day when we were touring the construction site together. "But my wife died young, and we had no children. All my life I devoted to business, and only now, in my later years, I realized that I missed the most important thing. It's never too late to start a family," I said. "Maybe not blood, but someone who really cares about you." He looked at me gratefully. "You know, Jeremiah, I'm glad we met. You remind me of my father. Just as straightforward, honest, with a sense of dignity. In the 3 months I'd known him, William had become like a son to me, kind, attentive, respectful. In the 3 months I'd been living in Hyannis, I'd transformed. Regular walks along the waterfront improved my health. A new wardrobe and haircut changed my appearance. And the freedom to manage my time and money restored my sense of self-worth. I enrolled in a photography course at a local college where I met a group of enthusiastic people my age. We often went on photo shoots, capturing sunrises over the ocean, local architecture, and shorebirds. Among the new acquaintances was Eleanor Pringle, a 74-year-old widow, a former literature teacher with a sharp mind and a subtle sense of humor. We quickly found common ground and began spending more and more time together. We went to movies, restaurants, concerts at the local Philharmonic. "You've changed, Grandpa," Sophie remarked during one of our visits. "It's been a long time since I've seen you so happy." We were sitting in a cafe on the waterfront, enjoying Saturday brunch. I had just shown her the pictures I'd taken at dawn, the misty beach, seagulls hovering over the waves, fishermen's boats heading out to sea. "I feel different," I admitted. "It's as if I had lifted a heavy weight off my shoulders that I hadn't realized I was carrying." "Dad and Mom weren't fair to you," she said quietly. "I knew it, but I was afraid to contradict them. I'm sorry for that." I took her hand. "You have nothing to apologize for. Baby, you were a child dependent on your parents. No one expected you to stand up for me, but I could have at least visited you at Seaside Haven." Tears glistened in her eyes. "I promised, but I didn't come once." "You're here now." I smiled. "That's the main thing." Our conversation was interrupted by my phone ringing. It was Eleanor inviting me to a poetry night at the local library. I accepted, and when I finished talking, I noticed that Sophie was looking at me curiously. "Who is it?" she asked with a slight smile. "A friend," I answered, feeling myself blush like a teenager. "Eleanor Pringle. We met on a photography course, just a friend." Sophie raised an eyebrow. "Or a special friend." I didn't know what to say. Eleanor and I had never discussed our relationship, but lately I'd often found myself looking forward to our meetings, noticing how she dressed, how she styled her hair, what perfume she used. I don't know. I admitted honestly, but I like spending time with her. Sophie smiled broadly and openly. "I'm so happy for you. Grandpa, you deserve to be happy." In early July, almost 4 months after selling the house, the guest house was ready. It exceeded my expectations. Spacious, bright, with large windows and a view of the ocean, with comfortable furnishings and all the necessary adaptations for someone my age, handrails in the bathroom. No thresholds, wide doorways for possible use of a walker or wheelchair in the future. William threw a small housewarming party, to which he invited Leonard and his nephew. Sophie, my nurse Clara, Eleanor, and some new friends from photography courses, standing on the terrace of my new home with a glass of champagne in my hand, surrounded by people who were genuinely happy for me. I felt an extraordinary peace. The ocean stretched out before me, just as it had 50 years ago when Margaret and I had first seen the view. The sun was setting, coloring the sky in water shades of pink and gold, like the sunsets we'd enjoyed together. "To new life," William said, raising his glass. "To a new life," echoed everyone. Eleanor stood beside me, her hand lightly touching mine. Sophie was talking to Leonard, laughing at his jokes. Clara was arranging the appetizers on the table, glancing at me every now and then with an approving smile. I raised my glass and added, "And here's to lessons it's never too late to learn. Here's to the courage to start over, even when it feels like time is running out. Here's to appreciating each day and never letting others decide how we live our lives." Everyone drank to my toast, and the conversation flowed on, but I stood for a while longer, looking out over the ocean and thinking about the path that had brought me here, of betrayal and pain, of loss and gain, of closed and open doors. I felt no bitterness toward Nathan and Cassandra, though I did not forgive them completely. They had made their choices. I had made mine. Perhaps someday we would find common ground again. Perhaps not. But that wasn't so important now. What was important was that at 79 I had finally learned to put myself first. Learned to say no to those who tried to manipulate me. And yes, to new opportunities and joys. I learned to live in the present moment, not in the past or the misty future. Eleanor touched my arm quietly. "What are you thinking about?" Jeremiah, I looked at her. A beautiful woman with intelligent eyes and gray hair arranged in an elegant style, and thought that life is indeed full of surprises. "About how it's never too late to start a new chapter," I replied, squeezing her hand, "and how grateful I am to fate for everything, even the hard times. They've brought me here to this moment. And you know what? I wouldn't trade it for anything else." We stood side by side, watching the sunset over the ocean, and I felt like I'd finally found what I'd been looking for all my life. Not just a home, but a sense of belonging. Not just comfort, but true freedom. Freedom to be myself. Freedom to choose my path. Freedom to savor every moment that life has to offer. And in this freedom, in this sense of peace and tranquility, I finally found my happiness, not in great achievements or material values, but in simple joys, in the laughter of friends, in the touch of a hand, in the rays of sunset over the water, in the knowledge that tomorrow will be a new day full of opportunities, and this day will belong only to me.